Sleep paralysis is a phenomenon in which a person temporarily experiences an inability to move, speak, or react. It occurs either during falling asleep or awakening. Often during it, people see terrifying hallucinations. Believed to be caused by disrupted REM sleep, people believe it is a paranormal occurrence where people are visited by demons or other ghastly spirits. Have you ever suffered from sleep paralysis? Let us know and tell us your stories in the comments below. Wait for number 1 to hear my own personal story. Number 5. Aliens. In 2002, a study had looked at the relationship between sleep paralysis and stories of alien abduction. They had found out that 60% of people who claimed to have been abducted were either sleeping or had just woken up. During a later study in 2005, 2 creepy stories had come out of them. A female was awoken in the middle of the night. Laying on her back, she couldn't move. Her body was paralyzed and she had the sensation as if she was levitating above her bed. Her heart was beating and her breathing was shallow. She felt tense all over. She opened her eyes and saw 3 beings standing at the foot of her bed. They were glowing in the light and looked insect-like. She said she felt electric vibrations throughout her body. A male victim had awoken in the middle of the night. Paralyzed and frightened, he felt like electricity was shooting throughout his body. He felt as if the energy from his body was being drained. Once he opened his eyes, he saw several alien-like beings surrounding his bed. Number 4. The Grim Reaper. The person who submitted this story claims that he was experiencing sleep paralysis for about 18 months. As he would suffer from it frequently, he knew the signs and would have the usual sightings such as shadowy figures standing around the room. But this one experience was much more terrifying than the rest. He had awoken in the middle of the night. Lying on his side facing the wall, he was paralyzed. He felt the covers move as if someone was lifting them up. Then, he felt something crawl in bed beside him. He couldn't turn around to see what it was. He then felt the thing grab his waist and felt it breathing on his neck. He described it as being cuddled by a skeleton with claws. He could only lay there until the horrifying experience was over with. He could still feel it breathing. This was until it whispered, "Not yet, you're not ready yet, I'll come back when you are." He then snapped out of it and turned around, but no one was there. I forgot to mention, he was home alone. Number 3. Can you see me? The submitter of this story claims that he suffers from sleep paralysis a lot and would suffer with it a few times a week. He claims most are mild, and because he is used to them, he knows how to calm himself and combat it. He said this was the most terrifying sleep paralysis experience so far. He was just about to fall asleep when he heard the voice of a child ask, "Can you see me?" This is when he opened his eyes and realized he couldn't move. As he noticed he was in the middle of sleep paralysis, he tried to calm himself. This is when he looked to the foot of his bed and saw him. He saw a little boy watching him. The boy then asked the question again. He closed his eyes and tried to force himself awake. The boy kept asking the question. Eventually, it was over with. He claims it was the most realistic hallucination he had ever seen. Number 2. Stalking Shadow. This submitter experiences sleep paralysis quite a lot and can usually jolt himself out of it. But this time, he wasn't so lucky. He says this was the scariest experience of them all. He woke up in the middle of the night paralyzed and could see a shadow that was slowly climbing up his wall. He could also hear a static type of sound which sounded similar to this. The shadow then began to transform into a tall, thin, scary-looking man which had no face. The only noticeable features were 2 balls of static for eyes. The figure then got closer and closer. With each step, the static got louder. It then stood right next to the man's head and began to scream at his face. The room then turned red and the figure's arms turned into spikes. Without warning, the figure drove a spike into the man's throat. The man then jolted out of it and began to panic and started gasping for air. He claims it was one of the most terrifying experiences of his life. Number 1. The Exorcist Girl. This is actually my own personal story. It took place about 5 years ago in 2010. I was 14 at the time. This was my first experience with sleep paralysis and it was truly terrifying. I woke up in the middle of the night, but I have no idea what time it was. I remember I couldn't move at all. The only thing I could move was my eyes. I looked to the side of my bed and there was a woman figure standing there who was lit up with an eerie blue glow. She resembled Linda Blair's character from The Exorcist. She just stood there with a grin on her face staring at me. I remember an overwhelming feeling of fear coming over me. I just remember thinking, turn the light on, but I still couldn't move. A few seconds after it, I snapped out of it. The woman had disappeared and I was shaken with fear. I'm not sure if it was because I was in shock, but I managed to fall asleep pretty much straight away after it happened. Since then, I've had sleep paralysis quite a few times, but I haven't seen anything and it haven't been so severe. I can say for a fact that is one of the most creepiest moments in my life. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, then be sure to give it a big thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to keep updated with our videos. Goodbye.